of bottomless frames, of three-sided frames. So every frame, the bees can build the comb down deep into this empty super below. Now we can add our third super on. And what we've just done is we've added these two frames with the comb in there to entice the bees to move up into this super, so they will start building comb and filling out all the rest of the frames that we put in here. And all the rest of the frames that are going to go into this box are your four-sided frames. All of them have bottoms. So now we can easily remove the honey super when we're inspecting, and we can get down and look into the brood chamber if we need to. So remember, position number 2, position number 9 in the second super. The bees fill that out with comb. You can move those up into the above super, whether there's any honey or nectar or anything in there or not. If it's just empty comb, you can still move it up into the super. You're just enticing the bees to come up, and they will come up if their own comb is up in here a lot faster than if you just put an empty super on filled with empty frames. And now let's finish filling our third super with the rest of our four-sided frames. You make sure you don't want to smash any bees. You got to be real slow. You've got to be real deliberate. Earlier I showed you how important it was to take the frames out of the swarm box and put them in the new super exactly how they came out of the box. And that was because the hive was establishing itself in its new home. Well, now that they've matured and established themselves in the new space, it's okay to take the frames from the outside of the super, move them up to the other super without adversely affecting the health of the colony. Okay, so I've put in all the frames, and what I want to do is center them and make sure all my 10 frames have the right amount of bee space in between them. Don't want to have too little, I don't want to have too much. Very important to make sure you center them so that they're straight as well. You want to have them as straight as possible in the super. And we can cover them all up. And these bees look like they're doing really well. They seem to be really happy. They like their new home here. They're building out quite nicely. Looks like a very healthy, happy colony. Okay, and there you have it. Proper bee management, adding more space to your beehive when it's needed, not too soon. You don't want to give them too much space too soon, or else they're not going to be able to keep it warm enough. Okay, well, it's been a couple of weeks now since we put this swarm in this box, so I'm going to check and see if it's time to add any more space to it. So far, I see some bees, but I don't see a lot of bees in here. I certainly don't see a lot of the frames covered completely in bees, so here's a really good indication that it's not time to add more space. You see all the bees are clustered in the center and the back here. They're not covering all of the frames. But let's pull one out and see how they're looking. They're still pretty active. I can see that they're bringing in a lot of pollen. Let's pull out this frame and take a look. Here's another example of some capped honey. This beautiful white wax coating on the honey here, and underneath there's some nectar in those cells. It'll turn into honey soon, and when it's ready, they'll cap it just like that white part. I'm going to go ahead and check the center frame. The center frame is a really good indicator of how your hive is doing. Most of the activity begins on the center frames, and it looks like there's a lot of bees covering here. I would suspect that the queen is in here somewhere, and we do have a good laying queen. I can see a nice capped brood pattern on this frame, even though the bees are covering it. This is where the bees cover the brood in order to keep them warm. So that's why you don't want to go into a hive when it's too cold outside. So there's a lot of activity here. They look like they're doing a really good job. They've built some beautiful comb. But there isn't, right along here is where you're going to see the brood. There's a nice brood pattern here, so it seems like you've got a pretty good laying queen. Nice gentle bees as well. That's what you want to see. You want to see your frames covered with bees, just like this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this frame back in now. I can definitely see that it's not time to add any more space to this hive yet. You want to be careful about adding more space. You definitely don't want to add too much too soon. So we'll just close this one up. We'll come back in another few weeks and we'll check and see on their progress. It's crucial to be aware of when is the right time to actually take honey from your hive. You want to make sure that you do not take honey from the hive if the bees haven't completely filled out one of these supers, especially right before winter. So in the middle of spring, early summer, if you see that you've got a couple of supers full of capped honey, go ahead and take a frame or two for yourself. Otherwise, if the bees haven't filled out that much, don't take it. One of the things that you're going to need going into fall is an entrance reducer. An entrance reducer does exactly what it says. It reduces the entrances of the hive, and it's simply a piece of wood that blocks most of where the bees come in. And the reason you want to do that is to prevent other bees from coming and robbing out your hives. It happens in the fall when there's less pollen and nectar available. So what I've used here is just the bottom of one of the frames, and I've cut it to be with about an opening about an inch or so, a little bit more of an inch on each side, and that reduces the amount of space that the guards have to guard, actually. So it's easier to keep them from getting robbed. So we'll put that in each of these hives. And the bees initially will be a little agitated about it because they're used to coming in all of this space, but they'll eventually get used to coming into the sides of it. There we go. Well, here's the final reward of all your hard work beekeeping and all the hard work that the little bees did too. This is honey. Capped honey, beautiful honey, ready to eat. And there are several different ways of harvesting the honey off of the frame. One of the ways is by using an extractor. And if you're going to use an extractor, you need to get yourself a hot uncapping knife. This is an electric knife that's very hot, and that removes the thin wax coating over the top of the honey. If you don't want to buy one, you can also join your local beekeepers association, who usually will have an extractor along with the uncapping knife that you can probably rent. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the wax capping with the knife to go into the extractor. You don't want to dig in too deep. You just want to allow the hot knife to remove the wax covering, and be careful that you don't burn your fingers there. Watch your thumb, and you let the heat do the job. It's removing the thin wax, exposing the honey underneath that is in the cells. So now that you've got your uncapped comb, you are going to put it into the extractor. And it'll spin it, and the centrifugal force will force the honey out of the frame. And you close the lid, you turn it on, and you let the extractor do the work. And what you're doing is it's the centrifugal force is forcing the honey out, and it'll flow to the bottom, and you've got a little gate, open the gate, and the honey pours out. But I have an easier way to do it. It's easy, it's simple, and it's a lot of fun. This is my favorite way of harvesting honey. Here's my full frame of beautiful capped honey, and the first thing I like to do is cut a hunk out and keep it as just as honeycomb. Cut out a great big hunk of this beautiful honeycomb for yourself, and just go along the edge here and remove the wax from the edge of the frame. I'm cutting away a chunk of honeycomb to put on a plate to have on my dining table. So I'm cutting away the comb away from the frame as it comes out in a great big chunk. putting it on a plate and leave it on the dining room table for friends and family, because this will never spoil. Or you can put it in one of these little clamshells that you can purchase. This is a great gift for friends and family. People love fresh honey right out of your hive. Next, you're going to cut away all of the wax that's attached to the frame. You're going to take all of this honey here and this wax, put it into the bowl, and crush it. This is a good time to get all your aggressions out, by the way. This is a great stress relief, too. So crush, 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 get that all crushed. Once you have that really, really well crushed, you want to scoop all of that out of there and put it into a strainer over a bowl. I have already put some in the strainer here, as you can see, and it's already drained through and filtered through. And then I have my nice clear honey at the bottom of the bowl that I can put into jars or leave right where it is. With the leftover wax that you've got in the bowl, you can take that outside, put it by your beehives, and the bees will clean all the honey off of that. Then you can take that wax and bring it back in, melt it down, and you might get a little candle out of it, or just leave it in your wax melter and use it later on when you're putting the strips into your frames. Of course, one of the things I love to do with honey is to take a little bit of the comb and pop that right in my mouth. That is so good and so sweet. One of the best parts about beekeeping. So now that I've taught you everything that you need to know about keeping a beehive in your yard, go out and get started. Educate your friends and educate your neighbors about it as well. And just have fun with it. So this is Randy Sue saying, happy beekeeping.